Everyone thought he was the cool teacher we could trust, but in one shocking moment, the truth came out and we watched him get taken away right in front of us. I'll never forget the silence in that gym when his secret finally exploded. Looking back now, it's almost surreal how perfect Mr. Fletcher seemed when he first arrived at our school. Teachers came and went all the time, burned out, retired, moved on, but he was different. He had that spark, that energy most teachers had lost years ago. He started teaching junior year English in the middle of the semester, replacing Mrs. Simmons, who had left suddenly on medical leave. Normally, when new staff showed up, there was a weird adjustment period. Not with him. Within days, everyone was talking about how cool he was. He was tall, dressed sharply, always in button-down shirts with the sleeves rolled up just enough to look casual. He didn't stumble through the awkward introduce yourself speech like other teachers did. Instead, he leaned against the desk, looked at us with this easy smile, and said, "Let's make one deal. I'll respect you if you respect me. Everything else, we'll figure out along the way." It worked. Instantly, he let us sit where we wanted. He didn't freak out when people whispered during class. And when someone was bold enough to ask if he gave a lot of homework, he just smirked and said, "Only if you make me." That line alone made half the class adore him. He was funny, too. He'd weave jokes into lectures, imitate characters from books, even act out scenes. Kids who never cared about English before started looking forward to class. I'll admit even I got swept up in it. And then there was the way he made every student feel seen. If you answered a question, he didn't just nod and move on. He'd look you in the eye, repeat what you said, expand on it, like your thoughts actually mattered. For a bunch of jaded teenagers, that meant a lot. Parents loved him too. At the next open house, he charmed everyone, telling them how bright their kids were, how much potential he saw in us. My mom came home that night gushing about him. "Finally, a teacher who actually cares," she said. For the first month, there wasn't a single complaint. No one skipped his class. No one slouched in the back pretending to sleep. He had us hooked. But here's the thing, perfect doesn't exist. And sometimes, the shinier the surface, the darker the shadows underneath. The first crack showed up on a Tuesday. It was nothing major, or at least, it didn't seem major at the time. He was collecting essays we'd written on the Great Gatsby. I was near the back of the room, and when he reached Jessica, this quiet girl who always kept to herself, he lingered a little too long at her desk. He leaned down, whispered something, and she gave this nervous laugh. Most of us didn't even notice. But I did. I caught the way she pulled her sweater tighter after he walked away, her cheeks red. Later, in the hallway, I asked her what he'd said. She just shook her head quickly and muttered, "It's fine." Then she changed the subject. I let it go. Maybe he'd just complimented her essay in a weird way. Teachers did that sometimes. But a week later, I noticed something else. He had this habit of calling on the same few students over and over. At first, I thought it was just because they gave good answers. But then I realized it was always the same type of student, girls. He'd tease them lightly when they got flustered, laugh at their jokes even when they weren't funny, make excuses to stop by their desks. It was subtle. So subtle you could miss it if you weren't looking for it. And the thing was, he was so likable. If anyone had said something outright back then, I don't think we would have believed it. He was the kind of teacher everyone defended automatically. Still, a seed of doubt planted itself in my mind. Then came the day of the pop quiz. Half the class groaned when he handed out the papers. But when it got to Emily, a bubbly, popular girl who always sat in the front, he slid hers onto her desk with a wink and said, "You'll ace this." I'm not worried. The way he said it made her giggle, but it made me uneasy. Teachers weren't supposed to talk to students like that. And yet, no one questioned it. Not Emily, not the class, not me. At least, not yet. Because the truth, that was just the beginning. We all thought Mr. Fletcher was the best thing that had ever happened to our school. But within a few months, we'd learn exactly how wrong we were. And I'll never forget the day it all came crashing down, because I was sitting right there when it happened. The second sign didn't come from something I saw. It came from a rumor. Our school had this unspoken system: gossip spread fast, and if you wanted to know the truth, you only had to listen closely enough. By October, people were whispering about how Mr. Fletcher sometimes stayed after class with certain students. Mostly girls. He'd offer extra help, but no one ever saw him do the same for guys. At first, it sounded innocent. Teachers stayed after school all the time. But the more I heard, the stranger it seemed. The girls he helped were usually the same ones he flirted with during class. One day, I walked past his room after practice and saw him through the little window in the door. He was leaning against Jessica's desk, smiling, while she sat there with her head down. It didn't look like tutoring. It looked like something else. When he noticed me peeking, he waved casually, like nothing was wrong. I waved back, pretending not to feel the chill running down my spine. The weird thing was, nobody wanted to believe the worst. Even when small things piled up, his charisma worked like armor. If anyone hinted at it, someone else would jump to defend him. Come on, he's just being nice. He's not creepy, he's funny. Why would a teacher risk his job like that? You're reading too much into it. I told myself the same things, because the alternative was harder to face. Still, the cracks widened. At the end of October, we had Spirit Week. On the day everyone dressed as their favorite decade, Mr. Fletcher showed up in a leather jacket and sunglasses, trying to pull off a 50s vibe. He got laughs and cheers in the hallway. But in our class, he leaned over Emily's desk and said, "So, who's supposed to be your boyfriend from that era?" James Dean. Or should I audition for the part? The whole class laughed. Emily blushed bright red. That should have been a red flag. But once again, his delivery made it feel like a joke. Like he was cool enough to blur the line. The teacher's lounge, though, must have seen it differently. By November, I noticed some of the older staff giving him looks in the hallway, tight-lipped, wary glances. Once, I overheard the math teacher mutter, "Unbelievable," under her breath after passing him. But nothing official happened. At least, not yet. The real turning point started during parent-teacher conferences. My mom told me afterward that his table had one of the longest lines. Parents adored him. He said all the right things, how their kids were bright, how he believed in them, how lucky he felt to teach such a talented class. But then, about a week later, I overheard a conversation between two girls in the locker room. They were whispering, giggling nervously. He asked for my number. No way. Like your real number? Yeah. He said it was just for school stuff. But he texted me after. I froze, pretending to tie my shoes longer than necessary. The other girl asked, what did he say? The first one bit her lip, then whispered, just that I looked nice that day. And that if I ever wanted to hang out outside school, he'd keep it a secret. That was the first time I felt sick to my stomach. But here's the problem, I didn't know what to do with that information. If I went to an adult, would they even believe me? And if they did, would the girl get dragged into something she wasn't ready for? So, I stayed quiet. The guilt of that still sticks with me. By December, things started escalating. He got bolder. During class, he'd sometimes rest his hand on a girl's chair while leaning over her desk. Too close. Way too close. Once, he asked another girl if she had plans for winter break. When she said she was visiting her grandparents, he smiled and said, so I'll have to wait until January to see that smile again. It wasn't just weird teacher behavior anymore. It was clear. And yet, still nothing. Until the day right before winter break. That's when everything finally exploded. It started normally enough, half the class buzzing about vacation, teachers half-heartedly giving lessons because no one was paying attention. But in our English class, Mr. Fletcher seemed restless, like he was more distracted than we were. About halfway through, Emily raised her hand to ask a question about an essay. Instead of answering from the front, he walked all the way to her desk, crouched beside her, and put his hand on her shoulder as he explained. The room went silent. He didn't notice or pretended not to. He kept talking, his hand still there. And then Emily shifted uncomfortably. She actually tried to shrug his hand off. That's when the air changed. For the first time, kids weren't laughing or brushing it off. We were watching, wide-eyed, realizing this wasn't funny anymore. And then perfect timing, the door opened. Principal Harris walked in. He froze when he saw what was happening. His eyes narrowed, and in that instant, I swear you could feel the whole room holding its breath. Mr. Fletcher, the principal said evenly, a word please. Mr. Fletcher stood slowly, trying to look casual. Of course, sir, but his face was pale. They stepped into the hallway. The door closed, and for the next 10 minutes, we all sat in stunned silence, no one daring to speak. When he finally came back, his smile was gone. He looked like someone who'd been caught red-handed. But the principal wasn't finished with him yet. That day was the beginning of the end. When we came back from winter break, the atmosphere around school felt different. Subtle, but noticeable. Mr. Fletcher was still there, still teaching, still trying to act like nothing had happened before vacation. But something in his energy had shifted. He wasn't quite as bold, at least not at first. For the first week or so, he kept his distance. He answered questions from the front of the class, avoided touching anyone, and even toned down the jokes. It almost felt like he'd been warned. But if he had, the warning didn't last long. By the end of January, the old patterns returned. The lingering smiles. The harmless jokes. The way he leaned too close when he didn't need to. Except now, more of us were noticing. The moment before winter break had changed the way we saw him. Once you start looking at someone with suspicion, you can't unsee the details. And the details were piling up. One afternoon, I walked into class early and saw him sitting at his desk, scrolling through his phone. He didn't notice me right away. I caught a glimpse of his screen and open message thread with a name I recognized. It was Jessica, a junior who sat 2 rows behind me. Before I could read more, he locked the phone and shoved it into his pocket. When he looked up and saw me, he forced a smile. "You're early. Good to see some dedication." I mumbled something and quickly sat down, but my stomach twisted. He wasn't even being careful anymore. That same week, Emily stopped coming to class. At first, people thought she was sick, but after 3 days in a row, rumors started swirling. Someone said she'd switched out of English entirely. Others said her parents had pulled her from the class after what happened in December. When she finally came back, she avoided eye contact with everyone. She sat in the back, arms folded, barely speaking. Mr. Fletcher tried to joke with her like he always had, but she shut him down with silence. It was the first visible crack in his armor. The real bomb, though, dropped in February. It was a Tuesday morning, cold gray, the kind of day where everyone just wanted to zone out. Mr. Fletcher was lecturing half-heartedly when the classroom door swung open. In walked Principal Harris, followed by Mrs. Klein, the head of guidance. Both of them looked serious for a random interruption. "Mr. Fletcher," the principal said firmly, "we need to speak with you in my office, now." The whole class froze. Again, Mr. Fletcher's eyes darted around like a cornered animal. "Can this wait until after class?" "I'm in the middle of an O," Harris interrupted. His tone was flat, leaving no room for argument. Now, the silence was so heavy you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Mr. Fletcher's jaw clenched. He set down his marker, gave us all a strained smile, and said, "I'll be right back. Just work on the assignment." He followed them out, the door shutting behind him with a loud click. The second he was gone, the room exploded with whispers. "What do you think's happening? Did someone report him? Maybe it's about Emily. I heard he texts people." Nobody knew for sure, but the tension was electric. He didn't come back for the rest of class, or the rest of the day. By lunch, the whole school was buzzing. Some kids swore they saw him leaving the building, flanked by Harris and Mrs. Klein, his face tight and furious. Others said he'd been suspended, but the truth trickled out slowly, piece by piece. Apparently, one of the parents had shown the administration screenshots actual texts from Fletcher to their daughter. Not school-related texts, personal ones, flirty ones, the kind of messages no teacher should ever send. That was it. That was the beginning of the unraveling. The next morning, Fletcher showed up again, like nothing had happened. He walked into our classroom with a fake grin, acting like he was in control. You could feel the confusion ripple through the students. Was he in trouble or not? But about 10 minutes into class, the door opened again. This time it wasn't Harris or Mrs. Klein. It was Mr. Carter, the vice principal, with a security guard. "Mr. Fletcher," Carter said, his voice sharp, "you need to come with us." That's when the room turned ice cold. A security guard. This wasn't just a talk in the office anymore. Fletcher's smile faltered. For a second, he looked like he might argue, but then he saw the guard standing there, solid and silent. His face flushed red. He turned to us, his students, and forced a laugh. "Looks like I'm in trouble." Ah, nobody laughed with him. He picked up his bag, slung it over his shoulder, and walked out. But before leaving, he muttered under his breath, "This is ridiculous. You'll all see." The door slammed behind him, and just like that, the spell was broken. For the first time, we saw him not as the charming and touchable teacher, but as a man cornered, exposed, and desperate. That day was the last time we ever saw him in our classroom. But the story wasn't over yet. The scandal was only just beginning. After the announcement, it was official. Mr. Fletcher was gone, fired, out of our school for good. But if anyone thought that would bring closure, they were wrong. If anything, that was when the chaos truly began. The story hit our local news within 24 hours. Reporters parked their vans outside the school, cameras set up across the street. Headlines read, "Beloved teacher fired amid allegations," and community divided over shocking claims. For the first time, our small town was on the map, and not for anything good. The article didn't name students, but it quoted concerned parents and confirmed what we already knew. Fletcher was under investigation for inappropriate communication with minors. That phrase alone, inappropriate communication, felt like poison. At school, things got worse. Every hallway conversation seemed to circle back to him. Teachers avoided the topic, but you could see the strain in their faces. Students who had once defended him started going quiet. And those who had been skeptical from the start felt vindicated, but not relieved. Because the truth was, the damage had already been done. Emily finally opened up to a few of her friends. I wasn't there, but word spread fast. She admitted that Fletcher had texted her repeatedly over the fall, and when she didn't respond, he started cornering her during class. That day before winter break, the hand on her shoulder wasn't the first time he'd crossed a line. It was just the first time others saw it. The weight of that revelation hit me hard. I'd seen things. I'd heard rumors. I'd even caught a glimpse of his phone once. And yet, I hadn't spoken up. I told myself it wasn't my business. But now I realized how wrong I'd been. And I wasn't the only one who felt that guilt. During lunch one day, a group of girls sat together in the corner of the cafeteria, whispering through tears. Later, Kayla told me they had all been contacted by Fletcher in some way, texts, comments, lingering conversations after class. Some of them hadn't thought much of it at the time. Others had been too scared to say anything. Now, they were comparing stories. And the picture they painted was damning. It wasn't just one mistake. It wasn't just one girl. It was a pattern. The police started calling students down to the office for questioning. One by one, names were called over the intercom. Some came back pale. Others didn't return at all. Everyone knew what it meant. They were gathering statements, building a case. The hallways buzzed with speculation. "Do you think he's going to jail?" "My mom said the district's getting sued." "I heard he left town already." No one knew the truth, but the theories only made it worse. Meanwhile, the town itself started splitting apart. Parents argued at school board meetings. Some demanded accountability, furious that Fletcher had been allowed to teach for so long. Others insisted he'd been set up, that it was all some misunderstanding. I remember walking home one afternoon and overhearing two neighbors arguing across their driveways. "He was the best teacher my son ever had." One shouted, "He was grooming kids." The other snapped back. That was the word that started circulating, grooming. It was ugly. It was heavy. And it was real. By March, the pressure cooker exploded. The police officially announced that Fletcher was under criminal investigation. They didn't release charges yet, but the fact that it was public sent shockwaves through the community. Reporters crowded outside the district office. Parents flooded social media with angry posts. Some shared screenshots, others accused the school of covering it up. And through it all, we the students were stuck in the middle. Our English class never felt the same. Mrs. Anderson did her best, but no one cared about essays or novels anymore. Every time we walked into that room, the air was heavy with memory. Fletcher's handwriting was still faintly visible on the whiteboard. His old posters still clung to the walls. It felt like sitting in the aftermath of a storm. The strangest part was how quickly it became normal. Within weeks, we got used to the reporters outside, the murmurs in the hallways, the absence of Fletcher. Life at school trudged on. But then came the day we saw him again. It was a Wednesday morning. I was walking with Kayla toward the cafeteria when a black car pulled into the school parking lot. At first, I didn't think anything of it. But then the door opened, and there he was, Mr. Fletcher. Only this time, he wasn't wearing his usual button-down and tie. He was in plain clothes, looking thinner, paler, his face tight with stress. And he wasn't alone. Two police officers flanked him as he walked. My heart stopped. We froze in place as whispers spread like wildfire. Students crowded by the windows, craning their necks to see. The officers escorted him inside, past the office, down the hall. He didn't look at anyone. He kept his eyes forward, jaw clenched. It was surreal. This was the same man who had once charmed us, who had joked his way through lessons, who had seemed untouchable. Now, he looked like someone completely different, a man stripped of power, a man caught. Later, we found out he'd been brought in to collect his personal belongings from his classroom under supervision. He wasn't allowed to talk to students. He wasn't allowed to linger. But the image of him walking between those officers burned into my memory. That was the moment it truly hit me. He wasn't coming back. And the story wasn't over. After that day, our English classroom felt like a crime scene. Mr. Fletcher's desk sat empty, his coffee mug still there, a stack of ungraded essays abandoned like relics. Every time we walked in, it felt like stepping into the middle of a ghost story. The substitute teacher they brought in, Mrs. Anderson, tried to act like everything was normal. She smiled too brightly, told us we were going to stay on track, but the tension in the room was impossible to ignore. We weren't just students anymore, we were witnesses. And outside of class, the rumors went into overdrive. Some kids swore that the police had already been involved. Others said Fletcher had just been suspended while the district investigated. A few even whispered that he might come back. That idea sent a shiver down my spine. Because the truth was, none of us really knew how bad it was. Until the parents showed up. The Friday after Fletcher was escorted out, the school called an emergency meeting in the gym. Rows of folding chairs filled the floor, the bleachers were packed, and the air buzzed with nervous energy. Students weren't required to attend, but a lot of us did. We wanted answers. Principal Harris stood at the podium, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. He cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and began. As you know, one of our staff members, Mr. Fletcher, has been placed on leave pending an investigation. We take allegations of misconduct very seriously. Our priority is the safety and well-being of every student here. The gym erupted in whispers. He held up a hand. I can't share every detail at this time, but I want to assure you, the district, law enforcement, and child protective services are all involved. That was the moment my stomach dropped. Law enforcement, child protective services. This wasn't just about rumors or jokes anymore. This was real. From the bleachers, I saw Emily sitting with her mom. Emily looked pale, her arms crossed tightly. Her mom kept rubbing her back like she was holding her together. Parents started raising their hands, voices overlapping. How long has this been going on? Why weren't we told sooner? My daughter said, are you going to protect our kids or cover this up? The questions grew sharper, angrier. Harris kept repeating, we can't comment on specifics, but we are taking immediate action. For once, the adults looked just as powerless as we felt. The meeting ended with more tension than answers, but the rumors that followed were louder than ever. Someone claimed Fletcher had been caught sending inappropriate photos. Someone else said a parent had threatened to sue the district. A junior swore that detectives had come to her house to ask questions. It felt surreal. This wasn't the kind of thing that happened in our small town. Teachers were supposed to be boring, safe, predictable, not the center of a scandal. But the strangest part was how divided people were. Half the students and a decent number of parents were outraged, furious, demanding Fletcher be fired and arrested. The other half still defended him. He was a good teacher. He cared about us. This is all just blown out of proportion. Someone probably lied. The split was ugly. Friends argued in the hallways. Kids who had once idolized him felt betrayed, while others clung to denial like a life raft. I remember sitting at lunch with my best friend Kayla, as she scrolled through her phone. Look, she whispered, shoving it toward me. It was a screenshot, blurry but readable. A message thread between Fletcher and another girl in our school. You looked amazing today. Don't tell anyone I said that, though. And below it, maybe we can hang out sometime. Just us. I won't tell if you don't. My throat went dry. That's real? I asked. Kayla nodded grimly. Her cousin posted it. It's everywhere now. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't deny what was right in front of me. For the next week, the screenshots spread like wildfire. Some were fake kids made memes out of them, turning the whole thing into a twisted joke. But others were real. You could tell. The district scrambled to contain the chaos. They sent out official emails, telling parents not to speculate online. They warned students against spreading unverified information, but it was too late. The fire was already out of control. And then the police showed up. One morning, 2 uniformed officers walked through the halls with Principal Harris. They didn't say a word to students, but everyone saw them. Everyone knew. The whispers that day weren't whispers, they were shouts. Fletcher wasn't just suspended anymore. He was under investigation. The final nail in the coffin came the next week. We were in math class when an announcement crackled over the intercom. Faculty and students, please excuse this interruption. Effective immediately, Mr. Fletcher is no longer employed by the district. That was it. Just like that, the words we'd been waiting for. The room went silent. Some kids exchanged wide-eyed looks. Others let out gasps. A few even cheered quietly under their breath. But me, I just sat there, staring at my desk, my heart pounding. Because it wasn't just about a teacher being fired. It was about realizing that someone we trusted, someone we looked up to, had been living a double life right in front of us. And the fallout was only just beginning. By the time April rolled around, the investigation into Mr. Fletcher had become the only thing anyone in town could talk about. It didn't matter if you were at the grocery store, the diner, or a baseball game. You'd hear his name whispered like a curse, or shouted in anger, depending on who was talking. For us students, it felt like living in the middle of a documentary. Every week brought new developments, new rumors, new reasons to feel uneasy about the man we'd once trusted. The police interviews got more intense. Kayla was called in one morning and didn't come back until after lunch. When I asked what happened, she shook her head, pale and tight-lipped. They asked about everything. Every comment, every look, every time he stayed after class with someone. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hug her. Another part wanted to throw up. And then the charges hit. It was a Thursday morning when the local news dropped the headline, "Former teacher arrested on multiple counts of misconduct with students." We saw it on our phones before first period even started. The article confirmed what we'd feared. Fletcher hadn't just been inappropriate, he'd crossed serious lines. The kind that carried prison sentences. The cafeteria that morning sounded like a riot. Kids were shouting, showing each other their screens, arguing over what was true. Some cursed his name. Some still defended him, saying the girls were exaggerating, that the charges were just technicalities. But most of us, we just sat in stunned silence, trying to process that this was real. That afternoon, the school called another assembly. This time, the superintendent herself stood on stage, her voice shaking as she addressed us. We are deeply saddened and angered by what has come to light. We want to acknowledge the bravery of the students who have come forward. This district will not tolerate any form of misconduct. Moving forward, we will implement stricter policies to ensure this never happens again. Her words echoed in the gym, but none of us were really listening. We were all staring at Emily, sitting with her mom in the front row, her face pale but steady. Everyone knew she'd been one of the first to speak up. That night, my mom sat me down at the kitchen table. She looked me in the eye and said, "If something like this ever happens to you, or if you ever feel unsafe, you tell me, immediately. Do you understand?" I nodded, but guilt burned in my chest. Because I'd had chances. I'd seen enough to suspect, and I hadn't said a word. The case dominated the spring. Court dates were set. Reporters hounded students outside the school gates, shoving microphones in our faces, asking, "Did you know him? Did he ever make you uncomfortable?" I avoided them every time, but I saw kids from other grades giving interviews, some crying, some angry, some just overwhelmed. The town split deeper with each passing week. Parents fought online. He was framed. One comment would say, "He's a predator." Another would reply. Families stopped speaking to each other. Friendships broke apart. Even among us students, the divide was brutal. Some kids were furious at the girls who had come forward, saying they'd ruined Fletcher's career. Others rallied around them, calling them heroes. The tension in the cafeteria was thick enough to choke on. And through it all, I couldn't stop replaying the little moments in my head the first time I saw him lean too close. The texts I overheard about. The way he waved at me that afternoon I caught him with Jessica. Every detail felt like a puzzle piece I hadn't put together soon enough. By May, the trial was officially scheduled. Fletcher's face was plastered across the evening news, no longer the charming teacher but the disgraced defendant. He looked thinner, older, hollow-eyed, the kind of man who knew his life was over. But here's the thing about scandals, they don't just destroy the guilty. They leave a mark on everyone. Emily transferred to another school. Jessica stopped showing up altogether, finishing the semester online. Kayla told me she was thinking about switching districts too, because her parents didn't trust ours anymore. Our English class limped along with Mrs. Anderson, but it never felt right. Every essay, every novel discussion was overshadowed by the ghost of what had happened. We weren't just classmates anymore, we were survivors of something we didn't fully understand. And then came the day of the verdict. It wasn't the final sentencing, but Fletcher had to appear in court for the official charges. Some of us skipped school to watch the live stream. The camera panned across the courtroom. There he was, in an orange jumpsuit, wrists cuffed, eyes downcast. He didn't look like a teacher anymore. He looked like a criminal. The judge read the charges out loud, one by one. Each count was like a blow to the chest. The room behind me was silent except for the sound of someone crying softly. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how quickly it had all unraveled. Just months ago, Fletcher was the cool teacher, the one everyone loved. Now, he was facing years in prison. And we were left with the fallout. Because here's the truth no one likes to admit, even when justice is served. The damage doesn't magically disappear. The scars stay. The trust we lost doesn't come back. And for us, that was only the beginning of the long road ahead. The last week of school that year felt surreal. Finals were coming up, graduation banners hung in the hallways, and yet all anyone could talk about was Fletcher's trial. It was like our entire high school experience had been hijacked by one man's downfall. When the sentencing date arrived in June, the whole town tuned in. It was broadcast live on local TV, and teachers even acknowledged that half the student body would be distracted, checking their phones for updates. I watched from home with my mom. She sat on the couch, arms folded, her jaw tight. I could tell she was bracing herself, even though neither of us had been one of Fletcher's favorites. The cameras showed the courtroom. Fletcher stood there in shackles, thinner than ever, his once confident smirk replaced by a hollow stare. He barely looked human anymore, more like a shadow of the man who used to joke with us about essays and prom dates. The judge's voice was steady as she read the verdict, guilty on multiple counts. A hush fell over the room. Even through the TV screen, you could feel the weight of it, the finality. Then came the sentencing. Years in prison. Enough to ensure that Fletcher would never set foot in a classroom again. When the gavel came down, I expected to feel relief, closure, maybe even satisfaction. Instead, I just felt empty. Because yes, justice had been served. But that didn't erase what happened. It didn't fix the damage he'd done to the people I cared about. The aftermath hit just as hard as the trial itself. Emily moved out of state with her mom, chasing some semblance of a fresh start. The last time I saw her, she gave me a small smile in the hallway, the kind that said, I survived, but I'm not the same. Jessica never came back to school. Word spread that she was in therapy, struggling with trust issues, trying to rebuild. I only saw her once that summer, at the mall, and a look on her face told me she wanted to disappear into the crowd. Kayla stuck around, but she was different too, more guarded, more outspoken when teachers crossed boundaries. She told me once, I'm not letting another adult get away with that, ever. As for the rest of us, we carried the story like an invisible badge. Anytime someone said remember Fletcher, you'd see faces tighten, eyes shift. It wasn't just a memory. It was a scar stitched into the fabric of our school. Administrators scrambled to save their reputations. New policies rolled in, stricter codes of conduct, background checks, anonymous reporting systems. Teachers were suddenly hyper-aware of boundaries. No one stayed alone with students. No one sent late-night texts. No one dared to be the fun, cool teacher anymore. It was a safer environment, sure, but it also felt colder. The trust that once existed between students and teachers had been shattered, replaced by walls and caution tape. That summer, I tried to process it all. I journaled, talked to friends, replayed every red flag I'd ignored. I kept asking myself, could I have stopped it earlier? Should I have spoken up sooner? The guilt lingered, but so did the lesson. Because the truth is, predators don't always look like villains. Sometimes they look like the person everyone loves, the teacher you'd never suspect. And that's why it's so dangerous. Years later, I still think about it. Whenever I meet someone who seems too charming, too good to be true, a voice in the back of my head whispers, be careful. Don't get fooled again. And whenever I walk past a school and hear kids laughing inside, I silently hope they never have to live through what we did. Seeing a teacher get fired on the spot felt like the most shocking moment of my life back then. But what came after the trial, the truth, the aftermath, that's what really changed me. Because once you've seen behind the mask, you can't unsee it. And in that gym, on that ordinary Tuesday when Fletcher was escorted out in handcuffs, I learned a lesson no textbook could ever teach. Sometimes the people you're supposed to trust the most are the ones you need to watch the closest. That's the kind of lesson that stays with you forever.